On a crisp spring morning in 2023, as the sun slowly rose over Portsmouth Harbor, National Crime Agency narcotics officers quietly observed the unusual activity taking place at the docks. The Atlantic Clipper, a large cargo vessel loaded with bananas, had just arrived from Colombia. It was a routine shipment destined for UK grocery stores. However, something was off. Port workers were seen hastily moving 2 specific pallets from the main shipment, clearly isolating them from the rest of the cargo. The pallets were transferred to a truck shortly afterward, and the truck was dispatched on a journey that would take it over 100 miles, all the way to a commercial property near Lichfield. This unusual behavior set off alarm bells within the authorities. What seemed like an innocent shipment of fruit was actually the beginning of an elaborate drug smuggling operation that would soon draw the attention of law enforcement agencies across multiple countries. Jonathan Arnold, a man from a privileged background, was waiting eagerly for his shipment. He had been told he would be receiving 1.5 tons of cocaine worth 118 million pounds on the streets, but little did he know, the entire operation had been set up as a trap. Dutch authorities had intercepted the cocaine 3 days earlier during the ship's brief stopover in the Netherlands. Instead of seizing the shipment outright, they carefully replaced the cocaine with decoy packages. The drugs were now in the hands of Arnold and his associates, who would unwittingly walk right into the authorities' trap. This careful orchestration of events ensured that Arnold's crew was caught red-handed, but they would not discover the truth until it was too late. Jonathan Arnold's upbringing was far removed from the typical image of a drug kingpin. The only child of successful parents, he grew up in an affluent household, surrounded by luxury. His parents, Sue and John Arnold, waited 10 years before having him, ensuring he had every opportunity available to him. They spared no expense in his education, sending him to the prestigious Repton School, an institution known for producing notable alumni like author Roald Dahl and TV personality Jeremy Clarkson. Arnold thrived at Repton, excelling in sports. He played for both the cricket and football teams, earning accolades for his athletic prowess. Later, local newspapers celebrated his record-breaking performances for Tamworth Rugby Club, where he scored more points than anyone else for 2 consecutive seasons. With such a promising future ahead of him, Arnold seemed destined for success in whatever field he chose. Despite his promising future, life took a dramatic turn for Arnold when the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020. His family's sign-erecting business began to suffer, and soon, staff were laid off. Arnold found himself taking on the workload of 2 people, working long hours across the country. The relentless schedule took a toll on his physical and mental health, and to cope with the stress, Arnold turned to tramadol, an addictive painkiller, along with energy drinks. Initially, this combination helped him stay awake and keep up with his grueling work schedule. However, Arnold's reliance on tramadol grew, and before long, he was consuming up to 20 tablets a day. The drug took its toll on his mental faculties, impairing his judgment, memory, and decision-making skills. As his addiction deepened, Arnold made increasingly irrational decisions, including forming questionable associations with individuals who would later play key roles in his criminal activities. As Arnold's removals business faltered, he found himself drawn into the underworld of organized crime. What started as a legitimate business quickly transformed into a front for a much darker operation. Arnold, struggling with both his business and addiction, was introduced to the world of drug smuggling. Using his furniture removal company as cover, he and his crew began hiding massive quantities of cocaine, heroin, and ketamine inside furniture vans. Some vehicles even had hidden compartments built into the floor to conceal the drugs from prying eyes. The operation appeared entirely legitimate, with vans crossing between the UK and Europe under the guise of a simple removal company, but the scale of the trafficking was far from small time. Arnold's gang was operating at an industrial level, moving huge quantities of drugs through the UK. The authorities were not blind to the growing criminal activities of Arnold's gang. In January 2022, one of Arnold's couriers, driving a furniture removal van, was intercepted by French customs officers. Inside the vehicle, the officers discovered 63 blocks of cocaine, totaling 71 kilograms, as well as 99 bags of ketamine, weighing 101 kilograms. The drugs had an estimated wholesale value of more than £2.5 million in the UK market. This marked the first significant seizure in what would turn out to be a much larger, multinational operation. It was a sign that law enforcement was beginning to close in on Arnold and his associates. In April 2022, Arnold and his gang attempted to import an enormous shipment of drugs, almost 1,500 kilograms of cocaine worth £118 million, through Portsmouth docks. This time, the drugs were hidden inside pallets of bananas on a ship that had come from Colombia. However, the operation hit a snag when Dutch authorities, who had been monitoring the shipment, intercepted the cocaine before it could reach the UK. The drugs were removed and replaced with decoy packages, allowing the operation to continue without arousing suspicion. The shipment was then allowed to continue its journey to Portsmouth, where British authorities were ready to monitor it closely. This twist provided law enforcement with the perfect opportunity to catch the criminals in the act, all while tracking their movements and identifying the key players in the smuggling operation. For such a large-scale drug operation to succeed, insiders were needed, people who knew the ins and outs of the port and its security systems. Enter Michael Jordan and David Oliver, two corrupt port workers who were crucial to the operation's success. Both men, aged 45, had access to restricted areas of the docks and used their positions to facilitate the entry of unauthorized vehicles and help divert attention from the suspicious cargo. Jordan, for example, could be seen on CCTV moving the pallets he believed contained the drugs into a separate warehouse. In exchange for their cooperation, the two men expected substantial payments, far beyond their normal salaries. However, their actions would lead them to financial ruin when their involvement was uncovered. As the shipment of drugs was transported across the UK, law enforcement continued to track the movements of Arnold's crew. A Turkish lorry driver named Ahmet N was recruited to drive the drugs from Portsmouth to a premises rented by Arnold in Staffordshire. Ayan's role was to collect the shipment of what he believed to be cocaine-laden bananas and transport them out of the port area. Meanwhile, one of Arnold's co-conspirators, Pan Sadik, waited nearby to pick up the drugs. The authorities closely followed the movement of the trucks, gathering vital evidence as Arnold and his associates believed they were pulling off a successful heist. However, the authorities had planted listening devices among the decoy bricks, enabling them to gather crucial information that would seal the fate of the criminal network. In June 2022, the authorities made another significant arrest. Connor Fletcher, another member of Arnold's crew, was stopped by Border Force officers. Hidden in two secret compartments within his lorry, they discovered 60 kilograms of cocaine. The drugs were carefully concealed in a way that reflected the level of sophistication involved in the operation. The authorities were closing in fast, and the noose was tightening around Arnold and his associates. In March 2022, Jonathan Arnold was finally apprehended by authorities. Despite his privileged upbringing and seemingly legitimate business ventures, Arnold's life had spiraled into criminality. He had managed to maintain an image of success on social media, showcasing his luxury lifestyle, including trips to Dubai, rented Ferraris, and a Rolex watch. But investigators soon uncovered the dark truth behind his extravagant lifestyle. What appeared to be a successful furniture removal company was, in fact, a sophisticated front for an international drug trafficking operation. The scale of Arnold's operation was staggering. As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered that the drugs smuggled by Arnold and his crew were worth tens of millions of pounds. The gang used a network of operatives, corrupt port workers, and insider information to move drugs from Colombia and Europe to the UK. Authorities from multiple regions worked together to dismantle the operation, and one by one, the key players were apprehended. The case had become one of the largest drug trafficking operations ever handled by law enforcement. In May 2023, several of Arnold's associates were convicted. James Jenkins, Jan Sadiq, and Connor Fletcher were sentenced to long prison terms, while the corrupt port workers, Michael Jordan and David Oliver, were convicted separately. Arnold himself pleaded guilty to multiple counts of conspiring to import and supply drugs. In July 2023, he was sentenced to 23 years and 6 months in prison at just 30 years old. The case highlighted the lengths to which Arnold had gone to build his criminal empire and the stark contrast between his privileged upbringing and the ruthless world of drug trafficking. The operation had been dismantled, but law enforcement officials knew the fight was far from over. Detective Chief Superintendent Jenny Scrim of the West Midlands Regional Organized Crime Unit reflected on the scale of the operation, calling it the largest drug case they had ever dealt with. Despite the arrests and convictions, the reality remained that as long as there was a demand for drugs and money to be made, there would always be someone willing to step into the void left by those caught. The saga of Jonathan Arnold and his crew had come to a close, but the war on drug trafficking was far from over. That is for our video about Jonathan Arnold. Like and subscribe and comment below about today's video, and I will see you on the next video.